67 teams to go on my road to predict all 131 teams this college football off season. Guys, we're moving on to these next 3 days. Going to be a shorter little segment of videos here as we're moving on to the FBS Independents, kind of that halfway point now between the Power 5 and the Group of 5. So over the next 3 days, I'll be covering 7 teams. We're starting with the Notre Dame FIghting Irish, and this is going to be a pretty exciting team to watch. Brian Kelly left to go coach at LSU, so Notre Dame upgrades Marcus Freeman from defensive coordinator to, yes, head coach. And I like Marcus Freeman. I think he can be a good head coach. And there's already some good recruiting talent coming into this Notre Dame program. But under first-year head coach Marcus Freeman, there are a lot of question marks with this Notre Dame team. So can Marcus Freeman pull Notre Dame into the college football playoff in year one? Or is it going to take a couple years for maybe a year or two for Notre Dame to be back contending for a spot in the college football playoff? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate, and welcome to my channel. I'm predicting all 131 teams this college football offseason. Guys, that means I'm doing your favorite team, so go ahead and hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you know when that video gets uploaded. To fans of the Notre Dame FIghting Irish out there, you guys are going to know this team a lot more than I do, so if you feel like I missed something, want to add something, anything of the sort, leave that in the comment section down below, and I'll be happy to see what you guys have to say. So let's talk about Notre Dame in 2022. No power rankings in the FBS Independents, so we're going to get right on into it. This was an 11-2 team last year, 11-1 in the regular season. Their only loss being to the Cincinnati Bearcats, a team that ended up making the college football playoff. And this is a Notre Dame team that, again, if they had beaten Cincinnati, probably likely would have got that 4 spot with how everything else played out around the nation. But that was a team that, even with that loss to Cincinnati, was right there contending for a spot in the college football playoff. And then the shocking coaching move happens. Brian Kelly goes over to LSU, and they upgrade Marcus Freeman to be that head coach. Couple stats for Notre Dame last year. This offense, pretty good offensive team last year. 426 yards per game with around 35 points per game. Defensively, really good defense last year. 340 yards per game with around 18 points per game there as well. So this was a really good team overall. And now this team is going to be headed under new management. As we take a look at some of the losses for this Notre Dame team. Of course, you got to start out with 3 really key guys from this Notre Dame offense a season ago. The starting quarterback, Jack Cohn, former Wisconsin transfer, is gone. 3,150 yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions for this team last year. You lose his production. You're going to have to find a guy to now be that new starting quarterback under that first-year head coach. Running back Kyron Williams had a 1,000-yard season, barely had 1,002 yards, 14 touchdowns on just over 200 carries. Not as good of a season as a lot of people, including myself, were projecting him to have, but was still by a long shot the leading rusher on this team. And then Kevin Austin, the leading receiver on this team, 48 catches, 888 yards, and 7 touchdowns a season ago for him. You also lose Lawrence Keys, didn't have a catch last year, and I believe has since transferred over to Tulane. Also, a backup tight end, George Takis, transferred over to Boston College. When you look at the defensive side, not a whole lot of losses on the defensive side, but there are a lot of quality losses leaving. You have Kurt Hinish, who had 2 sacks last year, along with 28 tackles off the D-line. A D-line linebacker combo type player. He's listed as a linebacker on screen. But Myron Tagovailoa Amosa, 25 tackles, 2 sacks there for him. And then Drew White gone, who was your second leading tackler last year, also had a pick 6. But probably the biggest loss on this defense, and I think without a shadow of a doubt, is Kyle Hamilton. 34 tackles, 4 pass defended, 3 interceptions a season ago, and was phenomenal during his time with this Notre Dame program. Taking a look, though, at the possible quarterback battle here, you got Tyler Buchner, who figures by many to probably be that starting quarterback option. But behind him, you have Drew Pine, who is going to compete for that spot. Now, Buchner, Pine, those are 2 guys right there that I really like, and that also got limited playing time last year behind, of course, Jack Cohn. And while their stat lines are pretty similar, Tyler Buchner, second leading rusher on the team with 336 yards and 3 touchdowns last year on 46 carries. So I'm going to lean towards Buchner to maybe do that, not just because of the stats, but I do think Buchner has the higher ceiling, could be the better quarterback, and I think fits better with what Marcus Freeman may be trying to do at this Notre Dame program. So Buchner, I would expect to be that starting quarterback in game one, although Drew Pine, you have a pretty reliable backup option there as well. Speedster running back Chris Tyree is coming back, 222 yards and a touchdown a season ago. Figures to be that lead back, although they could do a 2 running back system because Logan Diggs is coming back and had a pretty similar stat line with 4 fewer carries. I mean, Diggs and Tyree had pretty similar stat lines, but Diggs 230 yards and 3 touchdowns for him a season ago as well. When you look at the wide receiver position, I think there are some question marks of, we know Michael Mayer at tight end, one of the best tight ends in the nation. His name is on screen. But who's going to be kind of that next guy to step up? Well, I think it could be any one of these guys. Avery Davis, Lorenzo Styles, Braden Lenzy, although my pick to be lead receiver, probably going to end up being Avery Davis, who had 386 yards and 4 touchdowns a season ago. Lenzy had 3 touchdowns a season ago. There's also a couple of freshmen, a couple of graduates back there as well. So this could prove to be a fairly deep wide receiver room for Notre Dame, but I think there are some questions about kind of who's that next guy to step up. On the defensive end, you return Isaiah Foskey, who had 11 sacks last year. That's huge. Jaden Adamalola coming back, as well as Riley Mills, J.D. Bertrand, Jack Kaiser, Bo Bauer, all guys that could go in this year's NFL draft there as well. J.D. Bertrand had 102 tackles a season ago, so you return his production. Cam Hart, Clarence Lewis, and the guy that was tied with Kyle Hamilton with those 3 interceptions, DJ Brown, who's not on screen because Brandon Joseph, a transfer from Northwestern, one of the bigger pickups for this Notre Dame Fighting Irish team, and one of the bigger pickups in the transfer portal this year, one of the more coveted players, Brandon Joseph, now a member of Notre Dame, and going to be looking to replace the talents likewise of Kyle Hamilton. Let's look at the Notre Dame schedule because there are no conference games because this is an independent. I'm going to jump right on in to a quick schedule breakdown. So, one of the most anticipated games of 2022. In fact, you could say that Notre Dame has 2 or 3 of them. 2, 3, possibly even 4 highly anticipated games on the schedule. The whatever about how Notre Dame doesn't play a tough schedule, I don't know, man. I mean, looking at this schedule, I would not want to play this schedule if it were my favorite team. And speaking of my favorite team, Notre Dame's got to go on the road to play the Ohio State Buckeyes in week 1. And it's a game that not a lot of people are going to expect Notre Dame to win. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think Notre Dame will win the game on the road in the Horseshoe there either. Ohio State projects to be one of, if not the best team in the entire nation. Lots of metrics, lots of analytics love that team there as well. But Marcus Freeman and the narrative surrounding this Notre Dame program is that they can't play with the big boys. They don't show up to the big-time games. If Notre Dame makes this a 1-score game, watch out for Notre Dame down the road because they potentially could sweep the rest of their schedule if they happen to lose that game in Columbus on September 3rd. Speaking of the rest of their schedule, let's look at it. Marshall is there on September 10th. I don't think Notre Dame's going to have a problem with Marshall. Marshall loses a lot off of last year's team that made that team pretty solid. Cal is another team there as well. Some questions about the future of Justin Wilcox at that program. They are bringing in some transfers there, but Cal probably not the biggest threat to Notre Dame on the schedule. Road game against North Carolina could prove to be an interesting one. The Sam Howell era is over with North Carolina, and Mac Brown has underachieved pretty much every year that every year that he has since gone to North Carolina. With this North Carolina team, though, there is a lot of potential on this team, and they returned their top 2 targets from a season ago. So whoever that quarterback happens to be has weapons to throw to, and that might be a problem for this Notre Dame secondary when they have to go on the road to play that game. One game that not a lot of people are talking about is this game against BYU. Look, a neutral site game in Las Vegas. BYU, one of the top teams in returning production. I can't wait to watch that game. In fact, that might be, besides the Ohio State game, of course, probably the game I'm looking forward to the most between for really any one of those 2 schools. Then you got to play home against Stanford. That's a team that returns Tanner McKee at the quarterback position. Could end up being the 3rd quarterback off the board behind, of course, Stroud and Young. Stanford can be a sneaky team. Watch out. UNLV should win that one. Syracuse on the road. The Orange are going to be a team with a lot of fight this year. Don't go into that game lightly. Then Clemson at home. Another big game there. Clemson has a lot of question marks coming into this year. Do they fix their offensive problems? Is the defense still as good now that Venables is gone? There's a lot of questions about this Clemson program. And that is definitely going to be another highly anticipated game and probably an important game down the road into the postseason. Neutral site game with Navy here. I don't think Navy's going to be anything special. I think Notre Dame's got that one. You're at home against Boston College, who returns Jurkovic, Flowers, and Pat Garwo. That's a Boston College team to not take lightly. And then on the road at USC, who's probably going to be one of the better offenses in the nation this year with Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams. Look at all the transfers they brought in. I could go on and on about the transfers that team brought in, but this is a hard, tough schedule for Notre Dame. Let's look at the percentages, because I don't do game-by-game predictions. I do more percentage-based. Alec, tell me predicted team's record. So if the game's in red, I just don't see you winning the game. If the game's in orange, I still don't see you winning. But hey, it's college football and upsets can happen. Yellow or your 50-50 or high upset potential games. Games in yellow-green, games that you should win, but you got to watch out for the team on the other side of the ball. And games in green, I have you winning. So Marshall, UNLV, Navy, I think you should be able to win those 3 games. Cal, I think you probably should be able to win that one. Same thing with Boston College. You get both of them at home. You got to go on the road to play Syracuse. Or let's start with the home game against Stanford. Also probably should be able to win that one. But Stanford, again, not a team to take lightly. Now, the road games that are in that yellow-green color. On the road at North Carolina. This is a North Carolina team that can get better. Even though Sam Howell is no longer that quarterback. They return their top 2 receivers from a season ago. Lots of other talent back for this Tar Heels team. Could be a little sneaky game here right before Notre Dame has a bye week and then has to go to Vegas to play BYU. And also on the road at Syracuse, it's a team that, look, Syracuse is not going to be awful this year. I just think it's going to be hard for Syracuse to get results this year. This is a Syracuse Orange team that's going to have a lot of fight and a lot of drive. Watch out for that game in the Carrier Dome. Possible trap game right there. I mean, you got to go play Clemson the very next week. Watch out for that game on October 29th. That's a sneaky game right there. But in terms of the games that are in orange or yellow, of course you have that Ohio State game in orange. I just don't think Notre Dame game 1 under Marcus Freeman in the regular season, and he's going to be playing a familiar opponent. No, not Ohio State. Defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, who held the Irish in the second half to let Oklahoma State lead that comeback win last year. And we'll see if Marcus Freeman and Jim Knowles, what plays out there. But I got Ohio State probably more than likely getting that win there in week 1. BYU, Clemson, BYU, Clemson, and USC games that I have there in yellow. Again, BYU, one of the top teams in returning production. That's supposed to be a really good football team in 2022. And then Clemson, if you've watched my Clemson video, I think Clemson's going to be back. I think Clemson is going to be fine this year. But again, there are questions on whether or not they get that offense figured out. And then USC, again, probably going to be one of the best offenses in the nation this year. Year 1 under Marcus Freeman, I think, is going to have its struggles, but I think you're going to see a lot of success under Marcus Freeman, especially in the next coming years. I think this Notre Dame team can be right back up there contending for a spot in the college football playoff. This is a tough schedule, though, and I see Notre Dame going 10-2 throughout this schedule. I see 8-4 as that floor, and I see them losing at least 1 game this year. I mean, on the road at USC, on the road at Ohio State, I think probably those 2 most likely losses there, although Clemson, I think, going to be back this year. BYU, that's just a tough, tricky game that I'm really looking forward to watching. But speaking of that BYU game, that very well could be the difference maker right there that decides whether or not Notre Dame has a 9-3 season or they have a double-digit win year and possibly get a shot at a New Year's Six bowl game. I'm looking forward to watching Notre Dame in 2022. Let me know what you guys think about the Irish in the comment section below, and thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, do anything you can to help support the channel, and remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I will see all of you guys in the next video. Goodbye.